first here in.
I think that's it.
Okay, hopefully. Anyway, my name is Steve Gwinnell. I'm the director for the Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management Division.
I'm Clarice Cutler, and I work for A&R, representing A&R.
Jonathan Chairman, crop consultant.
Jill Goss, seed fertilizer specialist with the agency.
Stephanie Smith, Deputy Director with the agency within Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management.
I'm Morgan Griffith, and I'm Agrochemical Program Manager with the agency.
Laura DePietro, the Water Quality Division Director with the agency.
Wendy Sue Harper. My position is for the soil biologist. I'm a soil scientist.
And also in the room with us.
Sure. My name's Emily Inouye. I'm the plant health supervisor for farm with the Agency of Agriculture.
And I'm Clark Parmley, Ag Resource Management Specialist within the Agency of Ag.
Okay, now we have a number of people joining us online. Maureen, you want to call on the board members who are calling in first?
Yes, so board members that I see, Earl?
Yeah, Earl Ransom. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on a different computer. Earl Ransom, organic dairy farmer from Stratford.
Ryan?
Ryan Rebozo, Director of Conservation Science, Vermont Center for Eco Studies.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Vos, state toxicologist at the health department. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person today.
Thank you. Did I miss any members?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Terry. You hit introductions just spot on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. I can't see me, but that's all right. Yeah. Hi, Terry Bradshaw, University of Vermont. Just walking in the door and getting on the meeting. Guess that's it. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Others on the call. Patty?
Hi, everybody. I'm Patty Casey. I'm the Environmental Surveillance Program Manager with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture.
Brooke?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Decker with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, and I am the pollinator health specialist.
Dylan Gabbert?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan Gabbert, and I'm with Bayer Crop Science.
Fred Putnam? I can't hear you, Fred, but I'll move on. Sang Pham? I apologize for pronunciation. Okay. Zach?
Zach Schakowsky, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Agricultural Resource Management Specialist.
Thanks, Zach. And I have one phone number, which last 4 digits, 5192.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. We've got a pretty full agenda today, and I believe all the board members have received a copy, and it's been posted on our website. First thing on the agenda is to review the agenda and previous meeting minutes and action item review. So Morgan, you want to walk folks through that?
Sure. The minutes for the January 23rd meeting were sent out to this group, a few days after that meeting. I didn't hear back any comments or suggestions, so I guess they're on the table today, the same as they were sent, if we accept them without any changes.
Yeah, any board members have any changes?
Okay.
Okay. We'll do that. We'll go ahead and keep them the way they are. And was there an action item?
So there were some action items out of January meeting, and one was just the kind of how we went about the report that was due on the 15th. So we talked about what should be in it at the meeting on January, and so then a draft report was sent to the members, and then they made edits by the deadline, and then the final report was sent back to them, and then with the approval, it was submitted to the legislature.
Which we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
An agenda item.
And then one other one is that it was brought up in the meeting to have some kind of lit review articles into non-neonic active ingredients. So we only had from our seed report to date, like from the information that we had gathered by the meeting in January, we knew about one active ingredient that was metalaxyl that was on non-neonic treated seeds. And so just kind of like a preliminary lit review was sent to the members for that. And it's also available on our team site. And then that was it, other than just per diem reimbursement things. That is just a continual action item on there, just to remind everybody that if you're eligible.
Okay. And we've been joined by one of our board members.
Yeah, Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Steve.
We can hear you, Steve. Steve, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, apologies. Sorry, I'm late. Steve Schubert, representing, I think, beef and meat industry in general. I run a beef business on my farm in Charlotte, Vermont. I'm on the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. So that's it for the action item review. So on the agenda today, we're going to talk briefly about the report that we submitted on February 15th to the legislature. Got an update on our division activities that are relative to the activities of the board. And then the bulk of the meeting today will be to talk about a work plan for the board for the coming year. And we'll talk about some of the targets we have and timelines, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on that. One of the responsibilities of the AIB is to make recommendations to the secretary on any bills that are pending, any pesticide-related bills, or bills related to AIB type activities in the legislature. And so we'll talk about that when we get to that point, and then public comments, and then we'll adjourn. So with that, does anybody have any additions or modifications to the agenda? Any of the board members? Okay. So we'll start off by talking about the report. And since Morgan submitted the report, why don't you give us a brief update?
Sure.
Or a brief report on the report.
Yep. So basically, the report was that we did not recommend BMPs for the non-neonicotinoid treated article seeds. That report is up there, and then so we'll have it. It's not up on our website yet, but we will bring it up, and then it's available right now on the legislative reports website. But long story short, we wanted to say that there weren't many non-neonicotinoid treated seeds out there, and so we're going to focus our efforts on providing recommendations for BMPs on the use of neonic treated seeds. That's it.
Okay. Any questions about the reports that were submitted? And to date, I don't think we've received any questions from the legislature about that report.
Correct.
Yeah, it was submitted and now at the legislature. Okay, so, the next item on the agenda is the farm activities update. Dave Huber, one of our deputy directors, is out ill today, so he won't be providing an update for his part, but Stephanie will jump in and provide some updates on what we've been doing.
Yeah, so one of the updates we have, the agency has scheduled a meeting to occur, just staff people to occur with the American Seed Trade Association. We'll discuss seed certification, seed lab operations, both federal, state, and commercial labs, as well as labeling requirements as required by law. So we're going to review those things. We have not engaged with ASTA in the past, the American Seed Trade Association. So we're excited and we're looking forward, or I haven't, I should say specifically, but we're excited to have that conversation. So that's one item. Another item is the agency farm staff, Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management staff attended the Pesticide Stewardship Alliance annual meeting earlier in February. This is the Pesticide Stewardship Alliance is a group of government agencies, industry, research institutions that steward the life cycle of pesticides. And so one of the conversations that I'm aware of that occurred at this meeting was the recycling of pesticide containers. They also talked about the stewardship of pesticide containers over time.
Pesticide responsibility,
Yeah.
producer responsibility
organizations for pesticide containers. And then they also are working, actually our staff member, Annie McMillan, is going to be working on a work group to discuss the reduction of pesticide waste and what are those efforts can look like. Educating the public generally about pesticide purchases, proper storage and management of pesticides, at a commercial level. But what efforts can be made to reduce the waste associated with pesticides? So that's, they're putting together some suggestions and we'll make a proposal to the Pesticide Stewardship Alliance's board in March. Another item is we've received the agricultural input survey that we all worked on together that closed on the 23rd. It's not on the agenda to talk about here at this meeting. We will talk about it at a future meeting, but just some basic information regarding we had 49 respondents. However, we did send it out to over 600 farms, but we had 49 respondents. We did have one from each county, so we've met the legislative mandate of having a response from at least one farmer from each county. A majority of those reporting farms are out of Addison County. And then most of the size of the farms that reported were either small farms or certified small farms. And we only had one large farm operation that reported back to us or participated in the survey. So that's just some high level items there on that, so we can go deeper. But one question I do have, and I don't know, is whether or not we want to open up the survey again and then try to increase participation beyond 49 farms.
I think that's for the board to decide
Yeah.
after we get the results.
Okay, so we'll talk about it at the next meeting and then we'll have a more in-depth conversation. But I just wanted to plant the seed. And then that segue is perfect because we're going to talk about seeds now. So Jill Goss, who works at the agency, I work closely with Jill, and we have received a number of reports, both treated seed, untreated seed, GE seed reports. They were due on February 15th. We are continuing to receive them and we're going to accept them. So this is not a complete survey of all the information. We certainly have received more information regarding treatments of seeds beyond metalaxyl, lots more active ingredients. So I'm going to bring up the presentation and then Jill's gonna give you some information regarding what we have found. And just bear with me while I get this together. Sorry, it's backwards. Bear with me still. Oh wait, that's not what I wanted.
We can see it.
Yeah.
But I can get that over there. So
Yeah, okay, I'm doing it.
Oh, no, it's not
There it is. Yay. Technology. Jill, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm just going to give you a brief update on the treated seed reports received by the agency thus far. If you want to just get me on to the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
Awesome.
There. Okay.
Our reporting currently is displayed here. This is a format similar to what our respondents will file. This is the total tons. So we're not going to get bogged down in the weeds. We'll talk about the top three crops reported, which would be corn, legume, forage, and pasture, and soybeans. Next slide. So this display just basically shows the reporting amounts for those three are by far larger than any of our other seed. This is a little tiny. It will be available in the notes. Next slide. So I've broken down what we've received, and the dark blue represents the treated tons, and the light blue represents the untreated tons sold. So a quick breakdown of those categories. Soybeans, the treated tons was about 55, and the untreated was about 165 tons respectively. The legume, forage, and pasture treated was about 26 tons, and untreated was just under 0.2 of a ton. Treated corn was 1,173 tons, while the untreated was just shy of a half a ton. Next slide. So then I broke it down into treated sales reported to our dealers. 32% of the treated seeds were sold to farmers, and 68 was sold to dealers. For the untreated sales, similar, 13% were untreated sold to farmers directly, and 87% was sold, untreated seed were sold to dealers. So your total breakdown, total seed reported thus far is 1,492 tons. Of that volume, 1,256 tons was treated seed, while about 236 tons was untreated seed. Of that, almost statistically zero was a single product treatment seed. So almost every seed that reported a treatment had a combination of multiple treatments applied to it. So the single product treatment was less than 1/10 of a ton. And then the combination product treatment was 1,258 tons. The next one. So of those single treated seeds, by and large, we've got about 0.8 of a ton of fungicide treated seed. We've got about a little less than 0.125 tons that are treated with a biological agent of some sort. And then we had a report of somebody adding polymer at 0.09 of a ton. And the next, if you would, please. So the combination treatments, of those treatments, the tons reported that had an insecticide and a nematicide, were predominantly the most treated seed that we saw. Fungicide treated seed follows up pretty closely. And then we're talking about a biological or biostimulant applied to the seed at about, coming in about fourth. I do have about 70 tons reported that did not give me the treatment yet, and that company is working to provide the information. So there's just small categories of polymers, nutrients, and a one-off report of a surfactant applied.
Is this a percentage of total active ingredients, or is this of a percent of every unit ton sold? 43% of those units had an insecticide, so there could have been multiple on the same?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so just in terms of tonnage, how many tons were treated with one particular type of agent, but that would not capture like each layer that was applied to the seed. So it was just the tons of the agent found in the seed, if that makes sense.
Jill, Terry also has a question.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to it. This is tons of seed treated, not the actual tons of the treatment, I would assume.
That is correct. They're reporting tons of seed, and these numbers represent just the tons treated with by each particular agent, if that makes sense.
Yep.
We're on to the next. So out of the 1,256 tons of treated seed reported thus far, 173 tons were treated with non-neonicotinoid products, while the remaining 1,083 tons were treated with a neonicotinoid product. And then I provided some of the chemical names associated with the brand named treatments. And then,
Can you hold on a second?
sure. And then in my notes, I just had the list of neonicotinoids for those of you that don't know them off the top of your head, because I didn't. Imidacloprid, acetaminoprid, clothianidin, there we go, dinotefuran, nithiazine, thiacloprid, and thiamethoxam. And then the next slide gives us some of the biological treatment agents and their scientific names. And the last slide is the one-off treatments. There was a surfactant, there were some nutrient packages, and there was another precursor for signaling node growth on rhizobial related legumes. Any questions?
So this is, you don't have all the seed reports yet.
No, we're still actively getting
Any
reports
idea
in.
of how much, I mean, what, is this like half the seed, you think, or a quarter of the seed, or?
Did you say 70 ton section potentially is outstanding?
Well, I have 70 tons that have reported that they filed last year's report form, so that it did not ask for the treatments, and I've since followed up and asked for the treatments applied. I don't really have a history with the agency myself, but I did go back and look, and the total volume of seed reports last year were 1,508 tons, and our total tons this year were just shy of like 1,300 tons. So I'm assuming that we're going to hit that number pretty quickly.
Okay.
So it sounds like 200 tons.
I think
Generally outstanding based on prior reports.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we'll get more reporting because we're being more active this year than in the past, do you think?
That's possible, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we are being more active, I think, than prior years.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the total is for Vermont. We don't have a way of knowing what percent historically or this year that we've gotten.
So we have historic data about how many tons of treated seed, tons reported total.
So I have, from last year, treated seed reported was 980 tons. So we've exceeded that reported volume already.
Right, well, maybe, Steph, just want you to review what the reporting requirements are for seed period.
Yes, so distributors have to report to the agency by February 15th. However, we're continuing to receive reports, and we're excited to get out the reports.
Yeah.
So we're gonna leave it there. The reporting includes what's treated and what's untreated, who it's sold to, so dealer or farmer, or, you know, who the end user. And then the other item is the active ingredients that are applied to treated seed, what those active ingredients are. And so, yeah, so that's what's required to be reported to the agency, and also GE seed as well.
But who's supposed to report?
The distributor, so the person who's, the entity who labels the seed is the distributor.
Okay.
And in some instances, the distributor can sell to a dealer. A distributor can sell to a dealer, and that dealer can then also sell, and they can both be distributors. So there's potential for a little bit of double counting here, but this is what the law requires, and so we are enacting, you know, the reporting requirements in accordance with that law. So it potentially in the future, if we want to have more accurate reporting, we may need to change that a little bit, but we're actively gathering the information that we're supposed to get.
Got it, thanks. I didn't hear that it was like required by the agency, so I didn't know if we were able to assume that this was.
We're going to assume, yes, that everyone who is registered with us, that we're getting information from them, yes. And there's a lot more, as we said earlier, active ingredients than metalaxyl.
Right.
So, yeah, so we can dig in more, and we're going to publish a final report with all the information that we've collected. It'll be available on the agency's website, and we'll share that with board members. And the next actions with respect to whether or not research is necessary into every active ingredient, and we you know, that'll be something that the board can decide if they want the agency to continue with that.
Any other questions popping up there, Morgan? From any of the...
Nope, not in.
Okay. And so continuing the farm update, like I said, Dave Huber's out, the deputy director's out today, but the one item that he was going to share was the fact that the Vermont rule for the control of pesticides that was revised over several years actually has gone into effect. That went into effect on February 24th. So that new rule is in effect. That rule is available on our website, and it's been reported to the board before, so I don't think we need to spend much time on it unless somebody has any questions. But it's in effect now, and we're in the process of doing the implementation, or that's starting anyway. So, and that's that. So now we need to, unless anybody else has any questions about any of the information so far, we'll go ahead and start talking about the work plan development. So, you know, as everyone on the board's aware, one of the primary duties of the board is to make recommendations regarding best management practices for neonicotinoid treated seeds. There is a requirement in Chapter 6 VSA 1105A that the secretary will adopt BMPs. Oh, we lost our signal again?
Nope, we're just switching who's presenting.
Okay.
Keep talking.
The statute actually says the secretary will recommend rules that contain BMPs for neonicotinoid treated seeds, and it's the board's charge or opportunity, I guess, to make recommendations regarding those BMPs. And those are due by March of 2024. And the legislature is expecting them. I had the opportunity to testify before the Senate Ag Committee a couple of weeks ago, and the topic came up, and the chair, Senator Starr, you know, basically said they're looking forward to the recommendations. So it's something that we have to do, and that we will do. And but to get from where we are now to do that, we need a plan on how we're going to do this. There's a lot of things that we need to take into account. And so we have, within the division, we have developed a proposal for a work plan that's tied to the individual components that the board has to consider in developing. And as soon as we get the computer working, we can start talking about it. So we also have a proposal for a way to make decisions about those recommendations. because we're gonna have to make some decisions about what those recommendations are. And we'll get into that too. So you want to do the work plan first?
Sure.
And then we'll talk about the decision-making proposal. And again, this is all open to discussion. We're here to work with the board members. The board members are the ones that the legislature has, given the opportunity to do this. So we're going to try to facilitate that best we can. So.
Yeah, so we just try to kind of organize our thoughts basically as members, right? So we took this section of what Steve was just talking about, of this is what we are being charged to do as far as BMPs for the state for neonic treated article seeds. It says, in developing the rules with the Ag Innovation Board, the Secretary shall address. And then there's a list of 7 things that we thought, well, let's start there, right? That's great. They made our to-do list for us. So what I kind of just tried to lay out, and I don't know how many people opened this up on Teams in the last couple weeks, but so the overall goal is to have that recommendation for the Secretary of Ag. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, maybe we should just read the 7 things off. And I can do that if you want.
Yeah, well, yeah, so each one is a topic.
Right.
So,
But just sort of give people a scope.
yeah, so I'll go up here. So each one we've separated out, so how we're gonna tackle each one. So topic A, establishment of threshold levels of pest pressure required prior to use of neonic treated article seeds. B, availability of non-treated article seeds that are not neonic treated article seeds. C, economic impact from crop loss as compared to crop yield when neonic treated article seeds are used. D, relative toxicities of different neonic treated article seeds and the effects of neonic treated article seeds on human health and the environment. E, surveillance and monitoring techniques for in-field pest pressure. F, ways to reduce pest harborage from conservation tillage practices. And G, criteria for a system of approval of neonic treated article seeds. So that is the direct wording from the act that was passed. So we're kind of setting out, well, the overall goal is to put all of these together in a recommendation. So then we were separating them out, so each one, so required topic A, and so kind of identifying that objective based on the wording that's in the legislative act. And so just kind of teasing out, okay, what's the main objective from that wording? What information does the board need? What might we already have based on this objective? And then there's a opportunity for us, if a team member wants to take on responsibility of finding the subject matter expert if we need to go outside of the board. And then the strategy is, okay, how are we gonna find out what we need to know? So I've kind of put things in here with question marks and saying like, well, these, like, it's kind of like the discussion topics, right? Like they're not anything that we're, saying needs to happen. It's just something that to get the conversation started. So as of right now, for the overall goal, we know, so it's due March 1st, 2024. We were thinking of having a much earlier timeline to have a draft so that we can have time for discussion and edits and kind of, so we're not down to the last minute. So I'm not going to put the draft timeline due date as March 1st, right? So we are pushing it up.
Right, and there's some statutory things in there too, where we're supposed to, the secretary has to, they have the recommendations made to the secretary. The secretary then has to provide that to the legislature, the Senate and the House Ag Committees, 30 days before we actually start any rulemaking. So we have to back up to meet all those deadlines,
Mhm.
which is why the September target's in there.
So we're not gonna fill out like the overall goal right now, because basically all of the stuff, the required topics will go into what info we need for that.
Right.
So if we start with A, right, so this is in the wording in the act, is established threshold levels of pest pressure required prior to use of neonicotinoid treated seeds. So a question to board members is, objectives, this is me, do you want to say something other, objective is list economic threshold levels for identified pests. It could be something different.
Terry
shout it
has
out.
his hand up.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, just a question, because we've got sort of a, there's a juxtaposition of terms here where you have BMPs, which to me are typically voluntary, and then we have language in here about required. Do we have the charge? And I know there's been some discussion, particularly around some of the comments that were kind of put forth with the new pesticide rules, about whether or not the secretary has the powers to require things above and beyond FIFRA and other labels and whatnot. Are we expecting that that's the sort of, that this list of BMPs are going to be binding rules?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. So the language of the law is that the secretary, upon recommendation of the Agriculture Innovation Board, may adopt, well, sorry, that's the wrong one. Okay, so it's actually the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets, after consultation with the Agricultural Innovation Board, shall adopt by rule BMPs for use in the state of neonicotinoid treated article seeds. So, yeah, these would be, the plain language of the statute is that they'll be adopted by rule, and if they're adopted by rule, then they'll be enforceable. So that's something for the board to consider as the BMPs are being developed, that there will be in rule, and therefore will be enforceable. That being said, there are ways to write rules that provide flexibility and options. They don't, have to be extremely prescriptive. You can craft them so that it gives people who are having to comply with them some options on how to comply. So that's just how you make rules. But the statute says clearly that the secretary shall adopt by rule. Does that answer your question, Terry?
Okay. Okay, so first thing we have to address, establish threshold levels. So,
Morgan?
Yeah.
Before we can you just go through the whole list again, just so people can see that what each topic is, and I can sort of put it in context. So you got the economic threshold. I mean, go through, through your table. That's what I'm saying. So you got objective A.
So each topic, topic A corresponds to the A in the Act. B, so this is about the availability of non-treated. C is about economic impact. D, toxicities of neonic, human health and environment. E, surveillance and monitoring techniques for in-field pressure. F is having to do with reducing pest coverage for conservation tillage. G, establish criteria for system of approval of neonic treated article seeds. This one, when we get to it, so this is how it's worded in the Act. I do think that there's room for discussion around, a system of approval of neonic treated seeds, whether it's the approval of use. But, Stephanie, you could talk about like the approval of the.
Or is it approval of the seed itself with the context of like, it's pretty broad, so I think
Right,
the
right.
board has
Yeah, we'll
some
have to-
authority to dial in or interpret that section
Right.
of the law,
Right.
to determine what it wants to achieve with the,
Right.
that topic G. We have some hands up, but are you,
Yeah, no, you
okay,
can-
Steve Schubart, you were up first.
I'm wondering if we can get any other information or the group's opinion, or I can just get some clarification how we establish economic.
Steve.
threshold. Yeah, is my audio not great?
It's not great.
Yep, let me turn off my Bluetooth and I'll bring up that question again in a second. I'm sorry.
So we'll pivot and we'll go to Clara.
Yep, sorry.
That's right.
My question actually may have been pretty similar. I was wondering too about the required topic A. I'm just wondering, I don't know how we determine that at all, given the fact that most of the seed, like we saw just now, is treated. I wondered if I see Heather Darby is on here. Have we contacted her? Is she on board to do some research this growing season? Even if she is, that doesn't really give us much time to analyze her research and incorporate it. So just wondering if you can respond to that.
Yeah, so actually, so Heather is on board for a March 27th AIB meeting. And so I specifically asked if she could cover topic A for us, as well as the surveillance one, so topic E and F. So those three required topics, Heather has agreed to talk to us about in a month's time. And then in addition to that, yes, she is starting some research that we introduced for her that when she was unable to join, I think in January or December.
November.
And so basically she has a grant that is looking at exactly what we want to see. So kind of crop yield, as well as where neonics might be for fungicide only treated seeds versus neonic and fungicide treated seeds. So in addition to demonstration sites at different partner farms, we just met with her last week, and she's going to actually do a replicated study at her research farm in Alberg that we are going to work with her, the agency, to help fund, do soil vegetation sampling so that we can test for neonics and get at the objective of kind of the persistence of those neonics in those replicated plots. In addition, there's I think it's in the second year of another site where they've been doing with treated seeds with different management practices, and they've already been collecting water at the tile drain field, and so they've been collecting base flow, and then after storm events flow, they've already been collecting water, and so we're trying to help fund that and organizing the logistics of getting those water samples tested also for neonicotinoids chemicals. So Claire, you're right that we are on the cusp of some great research led by Heather Darby. We won't have a lot of data to inform us, but she is going to talk with us in March. And go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, and so Claire, this is exactly what the type of thing that the board needs to consider in making a recommendation within the time frame that we have. Is, what information do we have? What information do we need? Do we have enough information, and there are other sources of information too. And that's part of the work plan, is to identify the things that need to be considered, identify the information that's needed, the sources of that information, and then put it all together in a timeline so that the board can consider it as we move through the year. So I mean, the same question's gonna come up for all of the topics, is do we have the information? Can we get the information in time? You know, what are the sources of information? But that's what we need to identify in this work plan, is to lay out what we're gonna consider, how we're gonna consider it. You know, where we can get the information, and if we find out we don't have the information, we need to identify that. So, I mean, that's all part of the work plan, is to identify all those things. And then lay it out in a way that, so at each board meeting, we're tackling one of these topics, or one or more, and, you know, getting as far as we can in making some recommendations. And we'll talk about a process for doing that too in a minute that may answer some of those questions too. But anyway, that's what we need to do, is sort of lay this out, all these different things that need to be identified and considered.
Yeah, so if people want to say, I mean, this is just, you know, a placeholder right now. So in what info does the board need for this topic about economic threshold level? So we know, so one strategy that we know is set right now is Heather Darby's coming in a month to talk about this, but are there specific questions? So right now, what's written in there is identification of target pests or treated seeds. Are studies needed to determine these threshold levels for the identified pests, or do those levels already exist? You know, people here might know this is just me just writing in here. So
Steve, your hand is up. Sorry.
Yes, sorry about that before. I guess I was getting a little caught up on the term economics myself, and just thinking about the root of that term, and it being, you know, thinking about, I typically think of economics and thinking about it's evaluating a system as a whole. And so I've looked at cost of production studies specifically on grass-fed beef for just what I'm interested on, and trying to evaluate the economics or the cost of production from farm to farm has just been one thing that seems to be so variable. So it just, to me, this one, you know, we're trying to create BMPs that are based on objective goals, and this one, just to me, I guess there could be information out there, I don't know, but this one to me seems I don't know where to go for information, but I would just say that this one seems difficult. Sorry, I know that's not a question. If anyone can help, guys.
No, I want it. I will say, so, and someone here who is versed in IPM, so economic threshold level in integrated pest management system is a term for basically for what pest level. So like if you were, so to simplify it, like if you were to go out in your field and say, okay, I'm looking at how many, I have a baited trap, and if I know, because of studies that have happened in the past, if I have 5 flies on my baited trap, I know that's enough. That's my economic threshold level that I need to treat. If I have 4 flies, I know that those flies aren't going to cause enough damage to cause an economic impact to my crop.
It also goes to the cost of the treatment.
Yeah.
That's a factor in whether or not the trigger of the impact also covers the cost of the treatment or the correction, not just economic yield of value of crop, because that is very subjective to what the value of the crop is to an individual producer, no different than what Steve said. You know, those factors, if you just know it costs $10 to treat an acre, then you know that the economic threshold of you lose a 1/4 ton of silage is somewhere in that ballpark, or 1/10 of a ton, or whatever it is. So you can study that, but, you know, just like Steve's comment, you know, there's a lot more factors when you're talking about this type of stuff than just the treatment cost or the return on investment for that treatment or management practice.
And I would just,
so I agree with Steve that it's a very convoluted statement, that economic threshold.
I appreciate that. Also, just that I didn't realize that that was a term specifically tied to the IPM standard, so I'll have to read up on IPM. Thank you. But I
Yeah, no
agree.
problem. I mean, I understand, yeah, that it's very much, a lot of things go into it and it's a tricky thing, but there is, a term in IPM. that goes along with it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Terry, your hand is up.
Yeah, since we're cracking the door on this, I think it's also important for us to recognize that we are being tasked to think beyond the notion of $10 of crop saved is worth $10 of treatment, when we're actually being tasked to look outside the field at what those treatments are doing beyond the field edge. And that's specifically the charge of this board. So as we move forward, we need to, I mean, I grew up, Morgan and I come from the same literal school of learning in IPM, from an earlier point where you were often looking at, the value to the value of the crop minus the effort to put into managing the crop. The specific reason why this has come to this point is that voluntary IPM is not addressing some of the concerns that we are being tasked to cover. So we need to recognize that as we move forward, that a lot of these other pieces down in B, D, I won't scroll through the screen there. Look at other pieces that suggest external costs that go above and beyond the immediate cost to the grower.
So one of the, were the other questions, other hands up?
No.
Okay, I just want to make one point. So we have laid this out as, per the way it was laid out in the legislation. There may be some topics that we may need to consider as a board before we consider others that aren't necessarily in this order. So that's one thing to think about too, so what we're trying to do today is develop the work plan. What's the board going to consider when, what information is needed, because we need to utilize the time we have as a board to tackle all these things. And there may be, these are the things that we've identified in the statute. There may be something else that's related that we didn't include as something that the board needs to consider. So I'm just throwing all that out there because that's what we need to do today. The best we can is to identify, what topics we're going to consider, in what sequence we're going to consider them, what information we need to, gather for the board members to consider in order to make some recommendations. So that's the question on the table today.
My first thought is D. It's probably the first thing to start with. You talk about the assessment or the economic, it's repeatedly mentioned in these.
Right.
And D sort of kind of outlines as far as if, like Terry said, we need to be accounting for greater things than just, crop value, input costs, and that kind of stuff. Then that to me is
so that'd be the first thing.
Should be the baseline of the assessment of here we are trying to regulate or come up with BMPs that will become rules for something that, let's figure out what those pieces are first. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I agree with that. Yeah, we need to have, just like when you're writing a paper or starting a master's, you do the literature review first, find out what's out there. And I suspect the last time that, I just jumped in without raising my hand. I suspect the last time that this group or some version of this group, which is different from who's in the group now, did this was back in the pollinator committee when we really started digging into literature. And that's been, 5 years. Things have changed. So yeah, I think it is time to do something pretty methodical. So we've got the information that's out there, because I do see, some of the sources that we're potentially looking to call on, whether it's Elson Shields or Paul Hoekstra or whatnot. Those are just a few. There's many people who have done this work. This work's not just happening in Vermont. And we should let, use that science as best we can.
Okay, with any other?
Yes, Earl has his hand up.
Yeah, well, I wanted to just agree with what Terry just said and the way that trajectory that we're on there, like the environment and, risk to human health seems to be, the impact on farmers is important. And, I think it's important that we consider that, but there are definitely strong concerns. And the reason a lot of the people are, interested in this is because they're very concerned about what the bigger picture impact is. You know, if it was just a question about whether or not it made sense economically for farmers to use these things, that's a very small question relative to the larger question about, you know, all the other potential impacts, economic or otherwise.
Okay, any other answer? Oh,
So for environment here, I just don't want to make an assumption. That means water, pollinators.
Yep.
Does it mean things, because when I jumped on the board, I looked in the literature and saw stuff on amphibians being impacted through water movement. So that's really what we're talking about, is the whole broad, living things and things like water as well.
The environment's pretty broad.
Okay.
So this is exactly what we need to be doing as far as this work plan goes. So it sounds like D is one of the first things we need to tackle, right? So Morgan, why don't we fill out the table for D? And then, you know, and if we don't get the whole thing done today, at least we'll get a start. And then we know kind of where, and we can perfect this as we go forward too. So so this is the work plan for the board. You know, in order to get to the end goal of having these BMPs, we need to consider relative toxicities and effects on human health and environment. Okay? So what do we have to decide on this, Morgan?
So some things, so first, I like to start with what information do we need? So some things that are here, but we can strike or, and definitely add more. So lit review of relevant research, identify, so that's part of what Jill presented to us this afternoon, is identify new NIC treated seeds available in Vermont so that we can narrow, right, like, so you know what chemicals we're talking about. Human health, and then environment risk assessment of each active ingredient with a lens of use on treated seed. So kind of, but that's super broad.
Yeah, so this is a question directly to the board members. If you're going to make a recommendation on the relative toxicities and effects of human health and environment, what information do you need? Other than are the ones that Morgan identified pertinent? Are there other things that are pertinent to that consideration?
Do we need to break them down into categories? Maybe a little bit like the water, the pollinator, the human health side, because, you know, I assume not every source is going to cover those ranges versus trying to identify what are those primary concerns and then finding some sort of, you know, resources for those.
So like this, John, so like you want to break it into like impact to water, impact to human.
Well, the ecological risk assessments that are done by EPA cover pretty much all of that. They cover impacts on organisms broadly, which includes, you know, the various media that the organisms live in. So I would suggest that doing a review of the ecotoxicology studies done by EPA would be part of consideration for the board. I think that would cover a lot of that.
Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Steve, do we know if the human health risk assessments or the eco assessments include treated seeds as a potential exposure pathway?
I do not know, but that's certainly one of the things we need to find out.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I agree, you know, like you're just saying, those, you know, the human health risk assessments are certainly in depth and they do consider human health exposure to every pathway, you know, drinking water, food, et cetera. So I haven't looked at one recently for neonic, but I think that's the big question for me, is whether or not EPA has included treated seeds as a pathway. Because if so, we've got a ton of information to get started on.
Okay, so we definitely need to include that point in whatever we're evaluating.
Yeah, so do EPA, eco, and health risk assessments cover treated seeds? It's, you know, different assessments, but I think they do them the same way.
I would say any of the research or things we assess needs to pertain to not just the LD50 of a particular active ingredient, but it's pertaining to the treated seed pathway.
Yeah, right. Yes.
So it wouldn't be you couldn't look up this information and the proxy be the active ingredient in any pathway. It actually has to be as applied to a seed. That, I just want to confirm. That's, yeah. Okay.
Well, that's the most perfect.
Yes. But we don't know if that exists.
Right. Again, that's information for the board to consider when making the recommendations.
So the pathway would include not only the material washing off the seed into the soil, but also the dust of the planting.
Yep.
Because the pollinators tend to go after the corn dust because there's high protein in there. And they're looking for that at that time of year. So the whole mechanism of planting would be part of it.
Right, and again, so like, you know, we're working on this work plan here, so this is something that the board wants to know about, to consider. And so we've identified, and we can always add things to it as we go too, so it's not like, you know, this is a one-time thing. So the next question is, what resources do we already have? I mean, what information have you already considered that addresses this, or have you gotten that information already in previous meetings?
Terry has his hand up, but I don't know if he's going to answer your question.
No, I think I might.
Okay.
Sort of. You know, this is something you literally could put someone onto a master's or even PhD level project. At least the literature review. I've got a separate window open, just poking through some of the Google Scholar papers. There's of course been a ton of more work in the last 5 or 6 years. All the questions that have come up have been somehow addressed in some of the research literature that's out there. We're not going to do it justice by me just sidebarring it here and spitting it back during this meeting. B, it's going to take someone or someone's plural, some real time, I think, to screen through at least some of the review articles that kind of summarize this. But it's out there, and I think it's just a matter of tasking someone, and I guess technically that's the board. Although I don't know how many people on the board are used to actually reading scientific papers. So we'll talk about, I think, the mechanism how we collect this. But as long as we dedicate some mental power to it, it's all out there.
So actually, Terry, you just segued into the next two panels, which is board member response or staff responsibility and the strategy. So you're kind of talking about is the strategy and how we're going to do it. And so Morgan has some ideas about that.
Right. Well, I mean, what's their options? Like you said, Terry, it's a big undertaking. So either contract with someone or utilize an agency resource to complete an in-depth lit review. There is, and maybe people who are affiliated with UVM, whether we can get someone from the legislature to request it to utilize the Vermont Legislative Resource Service at UVM. I don't know the ins and outs of that. But I threw it on there. We can also utilize some contacts in EPA to talk through someone in the environmental fate and effects division that Sarah doesn't get at. Oh no, it does do the human.
Yeah.
Human too.
Yeah.
So, but those are options that are there. I don't know whether the Vermont Legislative Research Service, I don't know how viable an option that is, but if someone knows more about that.
I mean, I'll raise my hand to be technical. There you go. I'm gonna guess that group doesn't necessarily have the the background knowledge. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe they find people who do. I do like saying the Legislative Resource Service, to do a specific topical literature review. I do love the idea of tapping the EPA because they do these reviews all the time, and I know that there's some scrutiny of their reviews, but it's a pretty methodical process. And they may be, you know, they have to do them every so many years, so they may be on the, you know, as far out from the sun as we would want it to be in terms of, you know, timeliness of information. But depending on who our contacts are, I suspect Steve still knows a few folks down there in Washington. We may be able to find someone who can kind of give us a synopsis of the relevance of the data that's out there, the timeliness of the data that's out there, and sort of where the EPA has gotten some of its you know, its standings on there based upon the data that's out there. Notice I'm not offering for myself to do a lit review.
You were just looking for something to do.
Sarah.
Yeah, I can offer to dig into the EPA documents, so I have a couple of them open, and I would first want to get in touch with the chemical manager so I'd looked up imidacloprid stuff, and I can do that with somebody from ag. I have a little bit of potential concern about farming at least the human health, farming the human health question out to an undergraduate or even graduate level group at UVM, because I think I have some responsibility on the board to answer for the health department, so I can take on I can at least come up with an opinion on the human health part of that question with EPA resources and EPA chemical managers.
Okay, so we can put that in the board members' responsibility.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, so this is exactly what we need to do to develop the work plan. You know, identify what it is we're going to consider, what kind of information we need, where we could possibly get it. And I think, you know, the next panel there, does AIB have enough information? I think the answer is no at this point. And that would be completed as we go forward.
Yeah, yeah.
So in terms of timeline, it sounds like this is one of the earlier things that we'll want to consider as a board, right? But we need time to develop the information. So what are we thinking about when we should have a target for consideration of this type of activity by this kind of stuff?
With September being
With
like the end,
we
so
gotta
we
have
need
it
like
done.
way before that.
Yeah, like July or something, or June or.
I honestly think we should start in the next couple weeks. I would love to finish something before a deadline, so I would say let's make some progress. I mean, and Steve, this is up to however you want to work it. I'm happy to reach out to the chemical manager on my own, or if you want to sort of connect
Whatever
us.
you want to do it. If you need our help, let us know. But you certainly can do it. Well, all I'm suggesting is, you know, so this information needs to come for the board for discussion. And it may be more than one session for the board. But at some point, the information needs to come back to the board, because the board has to think about it and make some recommendations.
Would it be helpful to have it on the next agenda, just like on this particular one, but we might go into, because we're looking at E now or D. D.
Yeah.
There'd be an update on D at the next meeting, and then maybe another one of these topics. Like, I feel like we need to, sorry, I'm not on the board, but I'm providing an opinion. I feel like we need to address a couple of these items, maybe not all of them right now, and then have an update at the next meeting. Yeah, so that we can have a couple things going on at once.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Yes, I agree.
I agree.
So update.
Yeah, at least a yes, no on whether EPA has assessed this question, you know, because if the data is out there, then we have an easier road. If the data is not out there, then I think we're going to have a brainstorm session.
Right, okay.
And that would, in my opinion, include, the next update would be what have we got for things lined up as far as lit review and other things on the other side beyond the human impact piece.
Okay.
I mean, if we can spend the next period in time coming up with, you know, if we can get someone, third party, to do a lit review or something on some of these other agricultural pieces and how it pertains to those other environmental pieces.
Okay, well, one possibility would be, there are, Terry, you've already mentioned that there are some, sort of review articles.
Oh, there's piles of them. Depending on what angle that you're looking for, what country it comes from, what they're looking at, at this point in the game, there's quite a few.
Okay.
Economics.
There's also significant opinions on both sides.
Oh, sure.
Oh, of course,
that
of course.
It need to be weighed out and evaluated
That's what the board,
appropriately.
that's what the board is for. Well, I was gonna suggest that, Terry, if you can provide us with a list of the ones you're aware of, that, I'm talking about the staff of farm, including myself, we can take a look at those review articles that focus on the Northeast US,
Mm-hmm.
and have a, sort of an idea of what's out there, what they're saying by the next meeting.
Human environment is what we're looking at specifically right now under D.
Well, human and environment, and
Human, so I slurred the human and
yeah,
environment.
and so I think what I'm asking is specifically on the environmental effects. I think Sarah's gonna, and is the appropriate person to look at the human health part of it. We would take a look at the other parts of it, just to see what's out there and report back to the board. And of course, any board members certainly welcome to do that too, but,
Just provide articles to the
Yeah.
agency for a review.
or review them themselves or whatever.
Or, yeah.
But, what I'm saying is, under this board member staff responsibilities, Sarah's already said she's gonna do some stuff with the human health side. I'm committing us to do some stuff on the environmental side.
Mm-hmm.
But we need your help, Terry, if you can identify those things.
That made it all the way to sticky note territory. So those are the things that get done.
Means something.
Yeah.
All right. How are folks, anybody hands up or? Okay. All right, so we got one down.
Okay, so both of those are by March.
Yeah, or updates.
Yeah.
Okay, so the board wants to think about that, obviously, early on. So there are a couple of other things that we may have information out there already, or that I think Heather Darby can give us information about at the March meeting. And that would be, I think, E, which is surveillance and monitoring techniques. And no, I think that's probably it. And maybe F. But definitely surveillance and monitoring techniques. I mean, that's something that Heather's working on right now and is familiar with. So what we should do is put that on for the March meeting also for an update, and ask Heather specifically to address that issue.
Yep, and she already has said
Yeah.
yes, that she can address both E and F.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
I'll pipe in again.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems like A, E, and F are all kind of like fundamental IPM concepts. Threshold monitoring and cultural management. So it seems like those ought to be sort of considered as a unit.
Yep. So we probably could put a timeline. We'll probably, unless we have something that's outstanding, and if there's specific. Right now, Heather just has the, like the topic. So if there's something specific that the board, she has the topic in the context of what we're trying to do as a board.
Right.
So,
Right.
but if there's something specific, let me know and I can relay it to Heather that if there's specific questions that we want to get at other than, like our main objectives
Right.
here.
Right. And we're gonna obviously have conversations with her multiple times. So, Another topic I think that we could probably get a pretty good idea of fairly early in the process is B, which is the availability of non. And,
Yeah.
so maybe we should shoot for that early in the process too, like in April, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Sorry, guys. Also, I'm throwing out dates, on the second tab. This is me, obviously, these blocks can be moved around, but this row 2, I'm literally just picking a similar, the similar, like the 3rd or 4th Monday in the month, to get at. So that's where March 27th came from. And then we'll put the calendar. Right now, we don't have calendar invites beyond today. But that's where these dates are coming from. And so we were hoping, based on what we were asking for in the work plan, of whether these can be so it's a question for the board, whether you want me to put a hold out for every month right now, and then it's there, and then it's a bonus if we don't need a meeting every month, or whether you want to cut months out right now. So I guess that's a question out for the board while we're talking about getting things done by specific dates, but.
Right.
So this is, picking that through September, and then I kind of, it gets tricky around the holidays. So then I picked one early in December rather than skipping the end of November and the end of December. So kind of put one in early December instead, and then January.
October?
Yeah, I skipped October. Yeah, I can put one in. I guess I wasn't thinking of October.
Halloween isn't gonna.
Yeah, so this is something for the board to consider. I mean, there is a lot of work to do. And so the work plan that we're proposing is pretty much a meeting every month, except for November, December, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big lift. We have a lot of work to do.
Okay, so I guess, I'll put holds out for all of them. Is that right? Is that good with everybody? I'm seeing nods in the room. Good.
I see nods on the screen too.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's hard to see everybody. So we said April so availability of non-treated article seeds that are not neonic.
Right.
That's a low hanging fruit.
I think.
Yeah.
So we're okay with April on that?
Oh, yeah.
So what was my April? It's the 24th.
So how many we have left?
So we have,
Just got C.
and so the person who is responsible, so this is, so
That's us.
Yeah. Okay.
That's Jill.
Well, basically, they didn't get a question mark over here. It is Jill and Stephanie.
Might be calling for help.
So, I mean, is there an idea of how that's going to be a survey of distributors, or?
So we have our reporting, and we have the active ingredients that are applied to seeds. We're waiting for some more reports by the end of this month, but we'll be able to determine whether or not we have non-neonic treated seeds that are being sold in our
Right.
state. We know we have neonic treated seeds, but we don't have the volume of each or the availability.
Plus, we are developing a relationship with the seed industry.
Right, but the word is available versus, if you're implying that what's not treated and what's there, that's only there for a specific reason.
Right.
I think the greater question is the availability from these distributors of.
If it was needed.
If it was needed.
Right.
What's the availability and what are the constraints and what are the options? And I think that's the bigger picture that's trying to get at versus.
Right.
Yeah, we know there's some sold, but there's a reason it's 10% or whatever. I mean, that's to me, that's irrelevant, but.
Yeah, we are having we've kind of asked a couple of questions regarding seed treatments, and can you get them a la carte? Can you ask for them? And there are certainly limitations based on scale of an operation and timeline for when you can actually ask for that. That's just broadly the seed treatment.
My guess is you
opportunity.
have a handful of people providing 80% of the total seed sold in this state. Just my assumption. And so those would be the people, in my opinion, that we need to ask. Those questions need to be asked. What is your criteria if there's going to be no treated seed here? What's your criteria?
Yeah. I don't know if we're gonna ask.
Well, we can.
That's my thing. I would like that, as a member, I would like that to be asked. I want to know,
Right.
you know,
Right.
what if this board makes the decision or makes a recommendation, which is kind of what we're getting at to ask, what's the way this industry works.
Right.
Can I just ask a follow-up? Are you saying, just non-neonicotinoid treatments and plain untreated seed, or just one or the other?
It says non-nic, so
Okay.
I would assume that you could ask in general non-nicotinoid treatments.
I'll pipe up if I can now. I think the question is sort of the inverse, unless I'm hearing something backwards. It's not my understanding that some of the concern is a farmer could say, I don't want to use neonic treated seed in my field for whatever reason. And whether it's true or not, or if it's just a trope, the suggestion is that they have this constrained choice because all that is available on the market is treated seed. So there's not even an option not to. And I think that's what this is digging into, is to look at the truth thereof and then see whether or not there's anything that can be done to adjust that if need be. So it's not so much about whether or not things are available if people want them. It's whether or not things are available without treatments if people choose not to want them or are told not to use them.
And what are the constraints?
Yeah.
Because you may be able to do it, but you may have to make your commitment in October versus.
Yeah. And if it's that simple, then it may be that simple.
Yeah, and I think that's what's envisioned by this whole, set of things that the legislature wanted the board to consider.
So is that, are we still responsible, Jill and Stephanie?
Yes.
With all of those things? Okay.
Actually, you know what I'd like to do at this point?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, does everybody need to take a break? Are we all good? Good. Okay. What I'd like to do is shift from the work plan to the decision-making process. So we can talk about that a little bit. Some of this might make more sense. So, do people have this electronically?
They don't yet.
Okay, will you send it to them?
I can.
Folks in the room have it.
Folks in the room, right, you guys. Okay. Just wanted folks on the line to get it. Okay. So I know people just got it, but so I'll kind of summarize it and then we can get into a little more detail. But keeping in mind that the whole purpose of what the board is doing is making recommendations to the secretary, for the secretary to then propose rules regarding BMTs. The information the secretary is going to need is what proposals were made and what board members thought about those proposals, right? And I don't think it's appropriate to have a voting process per se where the board votes on something and, I don't think that's what the secretary is going to be looking for. I think what's important is what were the proposals, or what were the opinions of the board members about those proposals, okay? And there's actually two different things. There's proposals, so specific proposals about DMPs or thresholds or whatever they are, but there's also reports. So there'll be a report on the human health effects and the environmental effects of neonicotinoids, and there'll be a report on the availability of seeds and that kind of thing. All those, both the proposals and the reports, have to be, weighed in on by the board members, and that information provided to the secretary. So what this proposal does is it lays out a way to do that for the two different types of things, whether it's a report or a proposal per se. And we've also broken it up in between representatives of the agency and other AIB members. And the reason is because obviously we work for the secretary, and, it gives us kind of an unfair advantage, which we don't want to have. So we want the secretary to understand what the board thinks, what the board members think, okay? So we're going to separate out the opinions of the agency members from the opinions of the rest of the board members, if that makes any sense. And so basically what this does is it's a real simple process. If it's a proposal, then if a proposal is made either by the agency or a board member, then we will see, individually each board member then will state whether they support the proposal or don't support the proposal. If they don't support the proposal, why they don't support the proposal, and if there's any modification that will allow that support to be given. If not, then we just record those and support those who are, and that's the end of that proposal, okay? And that's the information that goes to the secretary is, hey, this was the proposal that was made, these are the members that supported it, these are the members who didn't, and here's why. And then the secretary, because ultimately the secretary is going to make the decision about what is in the BMP rule, right? It's his responsibility. And we're just providing the information and the thinking from the board. Same thing on reports. If it's a report, we'll see if the board accepts it. If the board members don't accept it, why? Is there some additional information or modification that will result in support? If not, then we just record who supported it, who didn't. And any member can bring information to a report. Any member can bring a proposal. So, but we're not, what I'm trying to get away from is a system where we have votes and minority reports and all that. It's sort of a modified consensus process is what it is. But it's a process that allows all the information to be provided to the secretary for him to make a decision. So that's the proposal. So do we have support? I guess we need to see who supports it and who doesn't.
I'll say something. This seems like a very logical, well laid out process for us to consider.
Okay.
I think it, and it's useful to understand where the information is going to the secretary and for them to consider.
Right.
So I would support this.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. How about
Silence is acquiescence.
Well, it won't be when we do the actual
No,
proposal.
when we do the actual proposal.
You have to state whether you support it or not.
Yeah, no, everyone seems to be.
And just a simple, if you are in disagreement, do you have time to draft or put your thoughts
Sure.
down to coincide or go with the opinion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the goal is to provide as much information to the secretary as possible on the thinking of the board members as to why something would work or wouldn't work, or I mean, we are kind of lucky that it's not the board that's going to make the decision. It's the secretary, and we just have to provide all the information to the secretary for the secretary to consider. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, so the second page of this is just, like examples, Steve, right, that you pulled out of like, for example, what we're doing right now would work this
Right,
way.
so
and
these
this
are
way.
each of the things that the board's gonna have to either a report or a proposal that the board's gonna have to weigh in on. Because we are going to have to, there are gonna have to be a set of BMPs. At the end of this, there'll be a set of BMPs that, will be proposed, and just in practice, I think it's primarily gonna be, the agency will be the one that puts it together and provides it to the board. And then the board will weigh in on each of the BMPs. Of course, the board members could each submit a BMP too, if you want to, but just the way things work and the fact everybody has jobs, I think we'll end up doing it. But the point is, this is a process where we'll consider it, and the secretary will know what everyone thought about it.
Clara is in support, has
Okay.
voiced support of this process. I wasn't looking at the chat, I apologize.
Okay.
It's like 5 screens.
As well as Sarah. So,
Awesome.
going well.
Okay, so we'll use this as the process.
And I'll put this up on the team site, it's not up there yet. I
Okay.
apologize, but-
Yeah, okay. And so now the question is, do we want to keep doing the work plan, or do we have enough progress at this point? Or should we just keep working this? We still have, what, three topics, I guess?
We only have one other is a legislative bills update.
No, I'm talking about on the work
Oh,
plan.
on here.
On the work plan.
Yeah, I would love to talk a little bit more, just because I feel like if there's specific people that we want to talk to, so I guess
Okay.
maybe I'm thinking of C right now.
Okay,
I would love to reach out to them sooner rather than later if we're talking about experts that are
okay.
outside of UVM and Vermont. So I had put this on just because, so the C is determine economic impact from crop loss as compared to crop yield when neonic treated seeds are used. I know that it hasn't been widely disseminated in AIB, but I think it was kind of thrown around. I don't know, so Elson Shields has a paper, and these can come up perhaps as other parts of lit review. We need to see with an economic lens of what's out there for relevant research. And then, so maybe that's the first step, and then identify people that you might want to hear a little bit more from. So there's 2 Cornells, and I don't know if these I think were just principal authors of a few articles that I've seen, as Elson Shields and Travis Grout, both from Cornell. I don't know if any member knows them or knows of them. But I was just thinking that was a way to bring in a subject matter expert. But you guys can, so maybe we first have to identify literature and then identify people we'd like to hear from.
Discussion?
So I guess if we're focusing our literature review for March, we can definitely push this to so the only thing right now we have from March to April is the seeds. There might be, obviously, will be some follow-ups for the human and environmental updates, I think, from March. We probably won't be all comprehensive by then, but maybe. We can push that. We can talk about it more.
I mean, to me, at this point, the beginning, the next few months are pretty busy. And maybe that can be something a little in a couple of months. I mean, we have quite a bit to do when it comes to the next 2 months. And to me, that's a scientific analysis from those researcher that, hopefully should not be as much of an opinion or a value. And I'm sure part of the lit review will also identify some of those people that have those kind of expertise or knowledge.
I just want to thank Earl and Steve. They've also run for the process. I am giving thumbs up, I'm acknowledging, but then I feel like for the record,
Okay,
I should mention that.
okay, so did you get that, Morgan? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing for this, so maybe we bring it back up to plan for it, but not complete it in May. So like we plan for like what's our plan of action for economic impact then for the future meetings after that. So it's like we bring it up as a topic then to say, okay, let's talk about what we want to do.
Okay.
And then, okay, so. Right, so the only one we haven't talked about yet is this topic G, and maybe the first place that we can start is kind of in the interpretation of what's written into, let's spell out what we want the objective to be that meets this.
Okay, I would like to get an opinion from our general counsel
Okay,
as to what that means,
well, I like that. Let's do that first.
and then we'll know what it is.
Create an article seed? It's kind of a strange word.
Yeah. Treated article is a sort of a term that's used in pesticide regulation.
Okay.
So as opposed to the pesticide itself. So there are different criteria for regulation, whether it's a treated article versus the pesticide itself.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I do think we need to get a legal opinion from our general counsel as to exactly what that should mean. And then we'll know what we can focus on. So that'll probably go out a little bit, maybe to June or July, maybe. For that part to consider, because I think this is also later in the game, once we've considered a bunch of other things, you know, before we can get to that point.
Okay, so for, you guys are getting a deep dive into Morgan's brain of how I work. So for March, so we know we're gonna talk about the ag survey.
Yep.
We know we're gonna learn a little bit more about seed data. We know that we are gonna have Heather Darby come. She's gonna talk about her research, and then also those 3 topics. And then we also have human health and environment update, lit review update. Okay, so tell me if I'm missing things that we've talked about. So April, what was the one we put in April? Sorry. Oh, that's the seed one.
Well,
We can put it
yeah,
in
actually,
April.
yeah, put it in April, because, yeah, we're hoping by the end of this month, we'll have all the data. And we'll also have met with some industry folks, this month, so, yeah, let's shoot for April.
And so we're gonna So looking at this, we will probably have a follow-up from some human health and environment. But I guess I'm trying to plan out, right? So you guys see this, so like what? So I know. So we in May we'll start talking about tackling that economic. And I know we'll come up with things from follow-ups from our March meeting.
Will there be follow-up from Heather, Darby stuff as well? that
Yeah,
we'll need to-
Yeah.
I think that might be like reoccurring. But you're right, like I think it's gonna be like in every one, maybe, but.
Probably, not- well,
I would say the human environment will just keep rolling as we get more, and, you know, I would encourage that we at some point have people to bring in and give topic and understanding to some of that kind of stuff.
and we can adjust this each meeting too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted like to, you know what I mean, we don't wanna get stuck only planning a month ahead, because I think especially if we're relying on outside people, then
Right.
we'll get stuck quickly.
And let me just say this, I
Yeah.
think, you know, as we're going through this, if any of the board members become aware of some source of information or a person or whatever that could come and provide information to the board, that, you know, we should make arrangements for that, you know, if there's a particular development or person or something, you know. But let me just say this too, what this work plan does is it really focuses the activity of the board on this particular topic, which is, so there are other things that the board's, you know, was tasked with doing, we're basically setting aside for now. You know, I mean, that's what the effect of this is. But I think it's appropriate because this is a big job.
September.
Yeah.
Due date.
Yeah.
Is there any interest in, and I suppose as information unfolds and the board considers that information, there might be an opportunity for staff to draft
Yeah.
portions of these
Yeah.
BMPs as well. So, and we don't know yet because we're not there, we're not in the information yet, but something else to consider.
Yeah,
We might start drafting in July,
Yeah, right.
addressing certain
Right.
things.
Right.
For instance, seeds. We may have some information by then.
Okay, any other things, work plan related that you want me to capture right now?
And if you think of something later,
Shoot me.
yeah, we'll revisit it. And you can always communicate with Morgan as to what it is, what your idea is or thought is.
Cool. So the next agenda item is Steve, review of relevant legislative bills.
Okay, well, let me just sort of summarize this, make sure we're all,
Yeah.
you know, so we've got a work plan now.
Yep.
We're gonna focus on this particular task. Got a lot of information to consider, you know, and I'd ask the board members to just, you know, if you become aware of information that's useful to the board, to, you know, bring it forward, you know, as we go forward. It's a lot to think about. Okay, so one of the tasks of the board is to advise the executive branch and General Assembly with respect to legislation on agricultural pest control and integrated pest management. Okay, so the way I read that is that if there was a bill in the legislature that affected those topics, that the board should look at it and provide advice to the executive branch, the secretary, and General Assembly. I'm not aware of any bills that affect those topics. But, you know, there may be, but there aren't any that I'm aware of that affect agricultural pest control or integrated pest management at this point. So, unless somebody else is. So, we can dispose of that topic pretty quick. So. Okay, so public comments. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a question or a comment to the board? Okay, well, in that case, I think we can, well, let's talk about the next meeting real quick. We're gonna meet here again?
Yeah, oh, good point. So thanks for filling out the survey. It was a 4-3 vote for Williston. So it's here in Williston right now. I know that we just had a huge discussion about not voting in majority and minority.
Well, not for this, but, yeah.
So I guess I'm up for, I was thinking we were gonna do it here in Williston, at least for March. But if we wanna get at those 3 votes, that voted for Montpelier. That was the runner-up is
Okay.
a Montpelier.
Yeah, and I would, you know, I think as we go forward, the more personal attendance you can do, the better. We're gonna be starting getting to some discussion of specific recommendations and topics. I think it'll be useful to have, you know, those discussions.
I'll say it's a good thing I had to come home and let my dogs out because I literally was planning to drive to Randolph this afternoon for some reason. So
Oh, you know, that's a very good reason. It was originally scheduled for Randolph, but then we did the survey and like no one voted for Randolph, so it got struck.
Yep.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll do March for Williston, and probably I'll do Williston for all, and then it'll be an anomaly to change it.
Right, okay. Okay, well, board members okay with adjourning? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate your participation.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.